Everybody, I'm Dr. Valerie Leyva. I am a clinical supervisor for Stan County BHRS. This is the Intern and Associates Training Series. Today, we're going to talk about managing stress in the workplace and avoiding burnout. So give me a sec to pull up the PowerPoint and we will begin. So, as usual, these are the county reminders about attending a live training, which doesn't pertain right now because you are attending a recorded training. So, workplace stress is really defined as the personal or workplace factors that contribute to your increased levels of stress while at work. There's tons of research that shows that workplace stress really results in decreased productivity. And so that's why for-profit organizations are interested in managing workplace stress and burnout. But also, it's really important working in human services for us to be as at our best and manage our own stress as well as we can because we are in a stressful work environment and we are dealing with consumers and community members and clients who experience significantly more stress than we usually do. So we have to be as calm and cool and collected as we can in order to deal with the many decisions that we have to make on a daily basis and the crises that we attend as well. Burnout is a consequence, excuse me, of chronic workplace stress that's not managed well. And it really is overwhelming the whole system. So it's your mind, your body, your brain, your relationships, your work life, and your family life. It frequently results in depression, self-isolation, increased use of substances or alcohol or caffeine or energy drinks or cigarettes or whatever it is that we might be using to cope with our situation. And it really can result in negative or cynical attitudes towards clients and consumers. And so that's why it's another reason that it's important to address it as soon as you can. So the learning objectives today are to learn to establish appropriate boundaries and communication skills with coworkers and supervisors. That's a focus, particularly for folks new in the profession. So if you've worked maybe in food service or retail, or you've worked as a bachelor's level associate in other organizations, it's really important to learn the culture of BHRS and how to effectively manage your communications with others, your communications with coworkers, and managing appropriate boundaries in this particular workplace. The other goal is to establish healthy practices of self-care to minimize stress and avoid burnout. So let's talk for a few minutes about what you can do to take a micro break. This is the first thing I like to talk to everybody about when talking about workplace stress. So what can you do in 5 to 10 minutes that's going to help you manage stress? For many people, it can be relaxation techniques. I've even turned out the lights in my office if I had one and laid down on the floor if it was appropriate and did breathing exercises. You can use any of the many meditation and mindfulness apps to do a 5 to 10 minute guided imagery or breathing exercise. You can read a book, you can listen to a song, you can do a 10-minute yoga video, you can go outside and breathe fresh air, you can dance. You can do all kinds of things in 5 to 10 minutes in the workplace that are very appropriate and are safe for work that will be helpful for you to manage your levels of stress, particularly if you've had a very stressful interaction or meeting. I absolutely recommend taking a 10-minute break. It might bump your schedule a little bit, but it's really important for you to clear your mind and your body and your whole neurological system as best you can so that you can be attentive to the next task or the next meeting or the next client interview or assessment. So don't be shy about taking 5 to 10 minute breaks as you need to, and communicate with your supervisor or your coworkers. Hey, I need to take five, or go to the men's room, go to the ladies' room for 10 minutes. Find a place where you can be uninterrupted to be able to take care of yourself. So I recommend that on your phone, I use my notes app on my phone a lot. Write down 10 things you can do in 5 to 10 minutes that are going to be relaxing, stress reducing, and able to help you refocus on the next task that you have at hand. This is about a 6.5 minute video on managing workplace stress. It's created by the American Psychological Association, and it has some of the very standard activities to do and things to think about in terms of reducing stress. So we're going to take a short break right now so that you can copy this link and view the video. So after viewing the video, you know that there are multiple strategies for managing stress. The first is recognizing the stress that is there. The stress affects the brain through neurotransmitters and hormones. It affects the body through those same processes as well. And it's really important to begin to recognize that. We work in a very stressful environment. When I was an administrator, when I was a manager, clinic manager, I used to tell people, you've got to deal with about 300 different pieces of information a day, at least, because you're dealing with information clients have conveyed to you, things you need to follow up on, questions you want to ask again the next time you see them, case management issues, how many phone calls do you have to make, finding your clients depending on the system that you work in and the unit that you work in. And even if you are 95% accurate, which is a really high accuracy rate, you're still going to drop 15 pieces of information a day. So just recognize that that's going to happen. And for many people, that's the beginning of recognizing that you can't be perfect in this kind of workplace. You can be as efficient as you can be and as productive as you can be, but you're not going to be perfect. A second strategy for managing stress is recognizing circumstances that trigger a stress response in you. Is it confrontation? Is it hearing yelling? Is it having to deal with a mandated reporting? What is it? Is it smells? Is it something? The five senses is usually what triggers us, something in the five senses. So, seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, and smelling. What of those five senses trigger you? So that you recognize your triggers and can either proactively take care of it. So if you know you have a meeting that's going to be stressful, you can maybe do some breathing exercises or a 2-minute meditation before you walk in the room, or recognizing the trigger after the fact and being able to take 2, 5, 10-minute break to get yourself reset after the fact. The third strategy is setting boundaries. And this can be tricky if you're new to the workplace or new to a particular organization. Working for the county is very different from working for nonprofits. There's productivity requirements that might be different from what you're used to working in, and it is a more formal management and supervisory structure. So, we're going to talk in a little bit more detail about setting boundaries and about proactive and clear communication with others. This doesn't mean being rude or being disrespectful or being challenging or difficult. It means knowing your job and knowing the boundaries around your job and then being able to clearly articulate it. And again, we'll talk about that in some detail in a little bit. Something that everybody talks about these days is work-life balance. And my gosh, it's still hard for me after all these years, making sure that I have time off to balance out the time that I'm at work and I'm able to take care of the responsibilities I have at home as well as taking care of myself. The next strategy is taking breaks and taking a vacation. I absolutely recommend that you do not save up your vacation time for a couple of years at a time and then take, a month or two off, depending on how you accrue vacation. Do take your lunch break. Do take a 15-minute break in the morning and the afternoon. Don't eat at your desk. Find someplace else in the building to eat, even if you can't leave the building. Take your days off. You've got to take these breaks. They're intended to give you some time to reset and renew, and they're really important for your mental and physical health. The final strategy is developing a professional support network. You're already doing this. Many of you started this in undergrad, you're continuing it in graduate school. You know each other from other agencies you've worked in the organization. You're figuring out who your reliable work buddies are at BHRS. This is really important. And it's important even if you leave the county and go into something like private practice or you go into training as an alternative. You really need that professional support network as you move along for the rest of your career because these are going to be your valued coworkers, cohort mates. Some of them might be elders or mentors that are going to be helpful to you in developing your career and figuring out challenging situations. So, of those 7 strategies, I'd like you to pick the one that you struggle with the most and then develop 3 doable activities that will help you manage the strategy. So, pick 1 or 2 of the strategies, and for each one, develop 3 things you absolutely know you can do in the workplace to help you with that strategy for managing your level of stress. So, take a few minutes to do that now, and then we'll continue in a few minutes. I want to talk now about struggles that are specific to interns or new employees and sometimes ongoing employees. I know over the years, I have struggled to have proactive and clear communication with some colleagues and setting appropriate professional boundaries with some colleagues. So it's really important for us to review this at this time. So, with proactive and clear communication, there are some do's and don'ts. The first thing is be very clear about your job description, who you report to, and how your work is assessed. If you don't know this, you're kind of flying blind or you're trying to work without a map. Most of us know once we get accustomed to a job or oriented to a job, we know what our day-to-day activities are, but it's really important to know where does the line stop between my job and somebody else's job? And being clear about that with your organization. I recommend reviewing job descriptions if you have access to that, reviewing your learning plan if you're an intern, talking with your coordinator or your manager as needed, or your supervisor or interns, your field instructor and your field liaison if you have lack of clarity about where the boundaries are and how your work is assessed. It's really important to meet regularly with your supervisor or your coordinator and ask questions. I've been a supervisor for a long, long time. I've been a clinic manager in different systems, and I don't mind people asking me questions. If you ask me the same question every week, that gets a little tiring, but I want to know that you're clear about what your job is and what the expectations are. And so if you have questions about that, don't be afraid to ask. If something doesn't feel right to you, don't be afraid to talk to your supervisor and have a direct, honest, professional communication with your supervisor or your coordinator about what's bothering you and how you can come to resolution. The challenge in the workplace is not challenges, because we always have challenges in the workplace. The issue about workplace issues is having all of these unresolved workplace issues or challenges. So I always say, let's take a strengths-based, solution-focused attitude towards it and work towards some resolution and not just leave it hanging out there. Obviously, be professional and clear in all your communications. And this includes speaking, email, texts, every way that we communicate now. Obviously, social media is not a place to work out your workplace issues. Hopefully, your social media isn't even discoverable. Hopefully, you're using an alias in your social media so that you don't mix your social media life with your workplace life. So make sure that those two are very separate. Um, and I'm also very clear about gossiping. Talking about other employees and other employees' issues is not productive. And so if you've got an issue with another employee and you try to work a resolution out with that employee and it doesn't work, talk to your supervisor or your coordinator. Some things to not do about proactive and clear communication. So don't wait until there's a problem. Try to nip things in the bud early as you can because it's always easier to resolve these issues earlier rather than later. Don't make assumptions. Don't make assumptions about what somebody else is supposed to do or should do. If you don't know, ask. So don't make assumptions about actions that others are taking in your workplace environment, particularly regarding your clients and your case management and your workload. If you don't understand their role or the tasks they're supposed to do, or you have lack of clarity about what you're supposed to do, don't make assumptions about that either. Um, Something that I call inappropriately avoiding conflict or difficult topics. Um, Gosh, as social workers at MFTs and LPCCs, it's really important for us to have a robust ability to deal with difficult, challenging topics head on. When I do supervision with everybody, interns and associates, I always say, first up, legal ethical issues, mandated reporting, suicide, homicide, any questions that you have that are urgent, so that we deal that at the beginning of the supervision hour rather than at the end. So let's deal with conflict in a proactive way. Let's deal with difficult topics in a proactive way. Don't be afraid to say you need help with a task. Certainly, as interns and new associates, it's expected that you will need assistance with many, many tasks. And I always said for these kind of clinical jobs, took me a year to kind of really feel like I knew all the bits of my job, all the paperwork, because that's always changing, all the laws and regulations I had to learn, and had good, robust a connection with my consumers and the people that I worked with. So don't be afraid to ask for help, and please don't gossip. Now, setting professional appropriate boundaries can be tricky sometimes because there are cultural issues and issues of diversity that sometimes get in the way. But there are three areas of personal boundaries at the workplace that I think are appropriate to talk about. One is physical boundaries, mental boundaries, and emotional boundaries. So, in terms of physical boundaries, my hope is that everybody at least has a desk that you're assigned to, or you have a drawer where you can lock up your belongings. Um, I had a job at a school. The therapist arrived later in the day because we worked into the evening to do family therapy at night. And I would have teachers meeting me in the parking lot saying, so and so's having a meltdown. We need you in classroom 3. And I'd say, let me put my lunch away and let me go to the restroom and let me unlock my office. I needed to be able to start my workday at a particular physical place and mental and emotional place. So make sure that you arrive at work with enough time to put away your belongings and report to your unit at the appropriate time. Always, always take your breaks and lunchtime. You can't work without those breaks. And if you do work through your breaks, you know that it's already increasing your stress level. And always take sick days when you're ill. Coming to work ill is not going to help you heal from what you need to heal from, and it may also expose clients and associates to whatever infectious illness you may have. So the second is mental boundaries, and this is about blocking off your personal life. So sign out when it's time to go home, unless you're handling an emergency. Don't Some people leave their work phone at work and don't take their work phone unless you are covering for somebody, or you're on call, or you work for crisis, or you're a supervisor, or a coordinator. Don't take your phone home. If you have a work phone or work laptop, don't take your work laptop home either, because it's a way of make severing that connection to the workplace, and you really need to rest and renew when you go home for the night. Block off time for paperwork. This is kind of different in each unit. Um, the last few years that I did clinical work during COVID, I always blocked off the first half hour of my day to make sure I caught up on all the paperwork from the day before, because I didn't like paperwork going over 24 hours. I would check my emails. I would talk to the staff to say, what's going on? Are there any crises? Anything I need to be aware of? So that was my way of doing that. And it was in my schedule, and everybody knew not to schedule me the first half hour. So find a way to block off your time or your physical space, or put on your headphones, whatever's appropriate in your unit, to set aside time for paperwork, whether it's a half an hour or 15 minutes, or maybe once a week you have an hour that you can block off or something like that. The third thing about mental boundaries is not taking on extra tasks, either to please others or because you don't know how to say no, or you're unclear about your job description or your job duties. Almost everybody resents extra tasks, or even if they like to do extra tasks, it's going to compromise all of your work. So be very mindful about what you need to say no to, and very clear and careful about what you say yes to. The third area of appropriate professional boundaries is emotional boundaries. So take a short break after intense interactions. Always let your supervisor know. Obviously, don't leave campus. Don't make it a half an hour. If you've had an intense session with somebody, or you've had a confrontation with somebody, take the 5 to 10 minutes to reset. Let your supervisor know if you're going to step out of the building, so that they know where you are and they know that you're okay. Talk to your supervisor when you feel discomfort around a client or a coworker's behavior. And this is where it gets a little tricky around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because sometimes people use the word uncomfortable as a code word for, I don't understand the way this person is different from me, and I don't know how to handle it. So even if you're in that situation, or you have some sense of unease about working with somebody, it can also be your spidey sense around a consumer, that the consumer might not be safe, or there's some clinical issue that's telling you you're getting a gut reaction, which is a real thing. Our bodies do respond to these reactions. Always, always work it out with your supervisor, particularly if it is a coworker, because you don't want to create issues in the workplace that don't necessarily need to be there. And finally, don't feel guilty for taking time off, standing up for yourself, or setting appropriate boundaries. Just as we have to be clear, assertive, competent clinicians, we need to be that way about ourselves as well. So these are three areas for setting appropriate professional boundaries. Now, in the video that you watched earlier, they discussed a lot of stress management techniques. And I'm not going to talk about these in detail because our culture is kind of saturated with this information right now. Just know that there are multiple ways that you can manage stress. And it doesn't have to be, coming to work doesn't have to be something that's depressing or a significant burden for you. If you're feeling stress, engage in some of these techniques. There are lots and lots of things to do. There are apps you can use. There are so many websites online about good health and nutrition, exercise and movement. Organization and time management is really important. And if you need assistance with that, also talk to your supervisor to see if you can figure out what's going to work for you. So think about some of these and think about what you can do, because I think the next slide is going to say what to do if you're feeling burned out. So I'm going to click on this website, and this is from a coach, a life coach on the Calm app. And I thought that his write-up was so good that I didn't want to try to repeat it. So I'm just going to scroll down and go through some of the information. This is a 5 or 6 page stress and burnout tip sheet. So he talks about the 5 stages of stress and how to address them. He also advertises a lot for Calm. So I want to be clear that I'm not promoting that particular app. There are many, many apps that you can use. But I thought that Chibs Okereke had a really good handout for this. And again, I'm going to give you time to look at this on your own, but it really does give a very good overview of stress. Many of us start out very enthusiastic about our jobs or going to grad school. We have a honeymoon phase, especially as we start. Golly, you got through that orientation phase of getting onboarded with all of your trainings. And then some folks might already be beginning to experience stress. We're a little past midterm in this semester. I'm recording this in November. You're starting to think about perhaps the final projects you have for classes. Maybe you don't have clarity in your units and you're wondering when is that going to get cleared up. So there's an onset of stress. So you get unpleasant symptoms. If you don't deal with it then, you may then begin to feel chronic stress on a daily basis. And it really is about your body and your nervous system and being able to reset that through your self-care activities. If chronic stress is not addressed, it becomes burnout, which is pervasive. It's not just at the workplace, you feel it in your home life as well. And then the final stage is habitual burnout. This coach then goes on to talk about tips to address stress and burnout that I think are very helpful. Becoming aware of how you're feeling. We talked about that earlier, about becoming aware of your stress. And he has some good tips for this. Almost every one of them ends with subscribe to the Calm app. Build your self-care toolbox. And this is really important. I want to talk for a second about something called decision fatigue. With these 300 pieces of information we get every day, we have a lot of decisions we have to make, a lot of micro decisions. Do we respond to what the client said now, or do we go in a different direction? How do we address this particular need of the client? Do we need to call a colleague? Do we need to call a particular agency? How should I handle this situation with a coworker? So as we make these decisions, our brain only has the capacity for a certain number. We each have our own set point for decision making. And so decision fatigue is a real thing that contributes to stress and burnout. And one of the things that's really important to do is reduce the number of decisions that you have to make. One of the easier ones for many people is fix your lunch the night before, pack your lunch box and your lunch bag with your snacks, pick out the clothes you're going to wear, and you don't even have to think about that when you're getting ready for work in the morning. I know many of you have families and children. You do this with your kids. Do these kind of things for yourself so that you don't have to keep making decisions about the stuff that we can kind of put on autopilot a little bit. This coach also recommends micro breaks, controlled breathing, a mindfulness practice, even if it's a 5 minute guided imagery that you listen to right when you start your workday. All those are good strategies. The third strategy is turn to your healthy behaviors. Many of you know what these strategies are. He's going to recommend quite a few of them. Put self-care at the top of your list. Self-care isn't selfish, it's essential. You have got to take care of yourself in order to take care of others. And that's really non-negotiable. It's really that important. And then there's a burnout assessment. And I recommend that you take this burnout assessment, see where you score right now, and it gives you a tip on the next page about how to interpret your score. So this is going to be different for everybody. Let me get out of this page and back to the PowerPoint. Um, what I'd like you to do is reflect on your burnout score and why you think the score is low or high. And then identify activities you can engage in to reduce your score and feelings of burnout. So it's really important to look at that handout and take the test and see where you score and develop some strategies and write them down either physically in a journal or put them in your notes app in your phone, or record them by voice somewhere that you can go back to them and build on those activities. There's some resources I really recommend. I'm a big fan of podcasts. Really good podcast from a business perspective. It's called the New Here podcast. And the question is, how do I set the right boundaries at work? And that's just a really good professional podcast. There's another one for effective communication skills training, and another good general one on stress management techniques. So I hope this video has been helpful to you in thinking about stress and burnout. I hope you take the time to look at the videos, read the handouts, and do the activities, because I think that that will be a good toolbox for you to help you move forward in this fairly challenging career. So the very end, think of one thing you're going to do this week to manage feelings of stress and burnout at work. So please do that. Next week, we're going to talk about use of self and countertransference in counseling, and I hope to see you there. Thanks. Bye-bye.